Welcome to Shadowed Tales Archive, a place where forgotten stories breathe again, where whispers crawl from the cracks of reality, and fear finds a voice. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and listen closely, because some tales were never meant to be told. Tonight's story is titled, They Came with the Morning. Let the shadows speak.
Part 1. The Crack in the Sky. I was halfway through brushing my teeth when the power went out. It wasn't just the lights. My electric toothbrush stuttered once and died in my hand. The bathroom fan groaned to a halt. The whole apartment fell into dead silence, except for the faint static of my neighbor's TV fizzling through the thin wall before it too went mute. That silence? That was the first warning. I leaned over the sink and spat out the foam, annoyed but not alarmed. Power outages weren't rare in the older neighborhoods near the outskirts of Detroit. But then I saw it, my reflection. The lights were off and yet my face was lit. Not fully, just faintly glowing, like I was standing near a dim lantern. I turned around. The window behind me was pulsing with a white light. Not yellow like sunlight, not orange like city haze. It was colorless, too clean, too cold, like hospital bulbs. It flickered faintly, on, off, on, and with each pulse the hair on my arm stood up straighter. I stepped to the window. Outside the sky was cracked. I don't know how else to describe it. Above the city skyline, a long jagged fissure stretched across the dawn-lit clouds, and through it, I could see something that shouldn't have been there, an enormous vertical slit of light. Blinding, pure, unnatural. It wasn't the sun. The sun was still rising to the east. This new light was suspended in the northwestern sky, high above the city, and it felt wrong. Like it didn't belong to our atmosphere. Like it had punched through. And then came the sound. A low thrumming. Like someone pressing down on a piano key that didn't end. It vibrated in my sternum, in my teeth. The light pulsed with it. And every few seconds, it grew louder, sharper, until the apartment windows began to buzz and tremble. That was when I heard the first scream. I ran down the stairs barefoot, half-dressed, phone in one hand, keys in the other. Others were doing the same. Neighbors pouring out of apartments, still in pajamas, shouting, confused, filming with their phones. But most weren't going anywhere. They were staring at the sky. I followed their gaze and saw that the crack was widening. The light pouring out of it now came in tendrils. Thin beams that snaked downward, slowly like fingers. They were quiet, graceful, almost peaceful. Until one of them touched a man across the street. He was just standing there like the rest of us, frozen in place. Then the beam passed over him, just brushed his chest, and he detonated. There was no delay, no build-up. 1 second he was whole and the next he was gone. A splash of red across the sidewalk. Bits of skin clinging to nearby windows. Someone screamed. Others backed away. Phones dropped. I fell to my knees and vomited. The woman next to me fainted. They didn't make noise. That was what made it worse. You think when death comes it'll roar or burn or shout. But these lights were silent. They danced across the sky like threads, probing buildings, touching cars, drifting toward bodies. And every time they touched someone, just a fingertip, they burst apart. Like overripe fruit. We didn't run at first because we couldn't process it. That's how it always starts. Our minds stall trying to explain. Maybe it's a freak military test, maybe it's radiation, maybe it's a projection. You can't believe it's real until it touches someone you know. Her name was June. She lived in 5B. I used to help her carry groceries up the stairs, and she'd give me terrible advice about women. She was yelling at someone on the phone, standing behind the hedge when the light passed over her shoulder. Her face twisted for half a second. Just confusion. then gone. A smear on the bricks. I started running. News spread fast, even though the networks were already going dark. My phone buzzed as I ran. Group chats flooded with frantic messages. What is that thing in the sky? Jack just died in front of me, W. They're saying it's happening in other cities too. Don't look at the light. I ran for the old library. It had a basement. Thick stone walls. No windows. I'd volunteered there in high school, sorting VHS tapes for the local film club. The staff was kind, and the power had been unreliable for years, so I knew the place inside and out. On the way I saw more beams. They were multiplying. Not beams anymore, not really, just patches of air where the rules had changed. Space that didn't behave. People were avoiding the sun, crowding into the shadows of alleyways, underpasses, parking garages. Someone yelled, "They can't see in the dark." I didn't know if that was true, but I wasn't going to test it. I reached the library just as a second fissure cracked open above the stadium. This one glowed red. The librarian was already dead. I found her near the back, her body half folded under the table, her chest caved in like a stomped melon. She'd locked the front doors though. That gave me time. I ran for the basement, pulled the door shut behind me and killed my phone light. It was pitch black, and it was quiet. For the first time in an hour, it was quiet. I stayed there for the rest of the day. I don't know how long. Hours? Felt like forever. In the silence, I remembered things I hadn't thought about in years. My father reading me stories by candlelight during a blackout. The warmth of his voice. The way he always said darkness was nothing to fear as long as you respected it. I cried. Not because of the bodies. Not because of the light. I cried because in that moment I knew the truth. The light had come for us, and it would not stop. Part 2. The Survivors Below. I don't remember falling asleep. When I woke, it was pitch black, the kind of dark that weighs on your chest. My eyes strained against it, searching for something familiar, walls, stairs, anything, but the blackness stayed solid. My legs were stiff, mouth dry, and every sound felt amplified like the silence was pressing too close to my ears. I wasn't alone. A breath, not mine, slow, shallow. I froze. Another breath. Then the sound of cloth shifting. Movement. I nearly called out, but something in my gut said don't. Not yet. Then the voice came low and hoarse. You alive? He was maybe in his 40s. Black beanie, worn denim jacket, backpack stuffed with dented cans. Called himself Mason. Used to work as an electrician until the light came. Said he'd been living in the basement for 3 days already. I saw you come in, he muttered, handing me a bottle of water. Didn't think you'd make it through the night. You were muttering in your sleep. Screaming too. What did I say? I asked. He just shook his head. Mason had rigged a makeshift living space in the back archive room. Thick blankets blocked off all light. A single oil lamp sat under a dented soup pot he used as a hood, casting faint orange glows without spilling light beyond our corner. He had a map of the city, paper, old, but every few inches there were crude red X's. Dead zones, he explained. That's where they don't even wait anymore. You walk through, you vanish. Lights just tear you apart without hesitation. He handed me a pencil. Mark where you came from. I hesitated. Then I circled my neighborhood. He cursed under his breath. That makes 5 this week. That was the first time I realized it wasn't just my city. He showed me a shortwave radio, heavily modified, and through layers of static we caught fragments of terrified voices from other states. A man in Kentucky screaming that the stars were watching him from inside the lake. A woman in Arizona describing red shadows moving beneath the sand. A child whispering in whispers too calm, too precise for her age. They live in light. but they dream in darkness. The signal died shortly after that. We weren't the only ones in the basement either. By late evening, Mason led me to the main stairwell, where several others had gathered in silence. No one talked much. Fear was the glue that held us together. There was Lena, maybe 50, a former biology teacher with an arm and a makeshift sling. Jonah, barely 20, reeked of gasoline and mumbled scripture under his breath. There was a young couple, maybe Korean or Chinese, I wasn't sure. They never spoke, just held hands like the world might rip them apart if they let go. And then there was Nia. She was maybe my age, early 20s, calm but not empty, sharp eyes. She noticed everything and she noticed me. "You the new guy?" she asked. "Guess I am." She tilted her head. "You saw it, didn't you? The one in the sky." I nodded. She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Then you know it's not over." Over the next few days, the basement became a strange kind of routine. Sleep in shifts, eat sparingly, no lights unless absolutely necessary. Mason had darkened every entrance with heavy shelves, duct tape, and blackout curtains. Outside the building, we heard things at night, not the lights themselves, but their aftermath. A soft hissing like static through leaves, then silence, then the smell, like ozone and meat. Sometimes we found what was left in the morning, or rather what wasn't. One morning, a raccoon lay in the stairwell, unburnt, unbroken, but its insides were missing. Not torn, not eaten, just gone. Hollowed out through the chest, like a light had passed through and taken everything that made it alive. "They're learning," Nia whispered behind me. "Experimenting." She said she'd seen one up close. Before the city fell, she'd been working at a private research lab on the edge of town. Her job was boring, processing atmospheric samples, but the day the crack appeared, everything changed. A light beam had passed through the lab's southern wing. 5 of her co-workers evaporated. One of the engineers survived long enough to describe something before bleeding out. He said it wasn't light, she told us around the campfire one night. Not really. It only looked like light. He said it moved wrong. It bent space like gravity does, like mass. But it wasn't mass. It was attention. Attention? I asked. She looked at me then, really looked, and I felt it in my spine. Yeah, like something seeing you from outside, from wherever those cracks go. And when it sees you, it makes a decision. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in the dark, back pressed to the cold cement, listening to the sound of someone crying softly in the corner. My mind kept turning over the same phrase, attention. Not energy, not physics, not even evil. Something was watching and choosing. Made me think of ants. We step on them without thought, but sometimes we study them. Sometimes we watch them just to see what they'll do. In the days that followed, we heard more reports from Mason's shortwave. The cracks had appeared in Toronto, then Seattle, then over the Arctic. And then, without warning, the sun didn't set. That was the next shift. We waited for darkness, but dusk never came. The sky dimmed slightly like a dying bulb, but it didn't go black. Not fully. A second sun appeared low on the horizon, blood red, silent, and too still. We called it the false sun. That night, none of us slept. Part 3. In the light of false suns. We had no choice but to leave. The food was running low. Canned fruit, soup, old MREs, gone or moldy. Mason rationed as best he could, but it was clear. If we stayed, we'd starve. If we left, we might die. Pick your death. I'd rather die moving, Nia said, wrapping a scarf tight around her face, than rot waiting for something worse. We all agreed, except Jonah. He sat on the basement steps, eyes glazed, rocking back and forth. We were told to wait, he whispered. Told to stay in the shadow. Told not to speak to them. But you're all going to speak to them? No one answered. He stayed behind. The plan was simple. Reach a FEMA outpost 5 miles east. Nia remembered seeing it on evacuation maps. According to Mason's shortwave, the station had gone dark a week ago, but someone had broadcast from it 3 days back. Maybe survivors, maybe shelter, maybe hope. We blacked out our clothes, faces, gear. Mason even wrapped a layer of matte duct tape around his boots to stop them from catching the sun. It felt ridiculous, futile. But when you're hunted by light, you learn to become shadow. We left at 3:22 a.m., or at least what used to be 3:22 a.m. The sky was never dark now, just dimmed, like a permanent early morning where the sun hovers low but never rises. And the second sun, the false sun, floated above the western skyline like an eye half closed. Red, watching. It didn't move, just hung there. And the longer I stared at it, the more I thought it pulsed. Not like heat, like breath. The city was unrecognizable. Trees stripped bare. Cars melted at odd angles, their aluminum frames slouched like wax figures in heat. Glass crunched underfoot, and in places the concrete had buckled, like something beneath had pushed upward, cracking sidewalks like eggshells. But no bodies, not a single one. It was like someone had cleaned the streets. We moved through alleyways under rusted scaffolding and the hollow shells of buildings, always avoiding open ground. The beams hadn't returned, those pure white death tendrils, but the light itself felt different now. Less like illumination, more like presence. I knew we were moving. We reached the first checkpoint around 6 a.m., an old strip mall near Grayson Avenue. That's when we saw it. It stood perfectly still in the center of the parking lot. At first, I thought it was a person. Tall, unmoving, humanoid. But as we drew closer, crouched behind an overturned SUV, I saw the truth. It had no face, no arms, no legs. Just the vague outline of a figure, shimmering with bright static, like a person-shaped hole punched into sunlight. The air around it twisted, shimmered, and wherever it stood, the light was brighter, sharper. Lena whispered, "It's one of them." "No," Nia said. "That's not them. That's a door." "A door?" I echoed. She pointed. "Look at the way the air moves. It's not pushing out. It's pulling in." And then it shifted. It didn't walk, didn't turn. It folded. Like a sheet of paper twisting midair, the figure rotated in place without moving a limb. And for a fraction of a second we saw through it. What we saw wasn't right. It was black. Not darkness, absence. A void. A space with no shape, no gravity, no rules. Floating inside were shapes. Not objects. Not alive. Not dead. Just things. Watching. One of them blinked. We pulled back behind the car. Mason was breathing hard, sweat pouring down his face. "They're not just here," he rasped. "They're coming through. That thing's a breach." "A scout," Nia added. I stared at her. "How the hell do you know that?" She didn't answer, but her eyes said she'd known more all along. We took a longer path around the breach, looped behind the hardware store, through the smashed windows of a pharmacy, into a drained water park where all the rubber tubing had melted into the concrete like black worms. We made it 2 more miles. That's when we heard the first signal. It wasn't human, not language, but it came through Mason's receiver in pulses. Click, 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 pause, click, 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 rhythmic, calculated. Jonah, still back in the basement, used to mumble something similar when he prayed in that fevered trance. Nia wrote down the clicks in a notebook, silently translating something. I leaned over her shoulder. "You recognize the pattern?" I recognize the structure, she whispered. It's not random. It's recursive. It builds on itself. Like a language? No, she said. Like a command. By the time we reached the FEMA station, the sky had changed again. The crack was gone, but something else had replaced it. A circle. Massive. Perfectly symmetrical. Black ring around an inner core of pulsing light, like an iris staring down. It hovered above the horizon, dwarfing everything. Static filled the air. Phones buzzed, dead and dying. Mason's radio began to smoke, and the wind shifted. Not natural wind, not air. A pull, like the whole earth was leaning upward toward the eye in the sky. Inside the station, we found 3 survivors. They weren't from FEMA. They were scientists. One woman, older, clearly the leader, stepped forward when she saw Nia. Told you she'd find us, she said with a smirk. I turned to Nia. What the hell is this? But Nia was staring out the window, up at the eye, and for the first time since this began, she looked afraid. Part 4. What Nia knew. The woman's name was Dr. Adrienne Voss, former researcher with a now-defunct agency called the Solar Observation Initiative, government-funded, black budget, supposedly disbanded 5 years ago. Turns out it had never been disbanded. It had simply gone quiet. They buried us under climate modeling and ionospheric research, Dr. Voss explained, adjusting cracked glasses. What we were really tracking was light. Not light as you know it. Not energy, not particles. Intent. A kind of conscious radiance that we first detected in 2016, brief pulses from deep space, in patterns too structured to be natural. Everyone assumed it was solar flares. She looked at Nia. She didn't. Nia sat apart from us, arms wrapped around her knees, staring at the burned-out radio. She hadn't said a word since we arrived. Mason tried talking to her once, but she didn't respond. Dr. Voss continued. Nia was one of our junior analysts. Brilliant, sensitive. But she started seeing things. Patterns no one else could detect. Connections between pulses and neurological responses. That was when we noticed the dreams. My stomach twisted. What dreams? She wasn't the only one. Everyone stationed at our Arctic observation point started having identical dreams. Of cities melting in daylight. Of eyes in the sky. Of voices humming through the sun. Her voice dropped, and then the light started appearing. They'd kept it secret for years. According to Voss, the first breach occurred near Barrow, Alaska. A research assistant vanished during a solar storm. No blood, no signs of struggle. Just gone. Within a week, 4 more disappeared. When a drone captured footage of a figure made of white static standing still against the snow, they evacuated. We tried to shut it down, she said. Tried to convince the government to fund countermeasures. But you know how these things go. Budget cuts, skepticism, political cowardice. Until it was too late. The first crack appeared above Moscow 3 months ago. And the rest we already knew. Mason was pacing now, visibly agitated. So what the hell are they? He snapped. Aliens? Demons? Living stars. Dr. Voss didn't answer immediately. She tapped the table once, then opened a heavy binder filled with diagrams, radio wave prints, and long tracks of handwritten notes. She flipped to a page labeled Phase Cohesion Collapse. They're not here to invade, she said. They're here because we called them. I blinked. What? She pointed to the binder. Our sun is dying. Very slowly, but dying nonetheless. Over the last 10 years, we began manipulating solar output through atmospheric modulation and synthetic reflectors in orbit. Experimental tech, untested, dangerous. But it worked, I said. We bought time. Voss nodded grimly, and in doing so we signaled something. Something that recognizes manipulation of stellar bodies as intelligent activity. Something that only responds to civilizations capable of disrupting natural stellar life cycles. They saw us, Mason muttered. They answered, Voss corrected. And now they're evaluating. It wasn't a war. Not really. Not yet. It was a harvest. A survey. A test to see if we were worth preserving, partnering, or eliminating. And so far humanity was failing. Jonah had said something once. Something about voices. A judgment. You said it's attention, I whispered. The light, it's like being seen. Yes, Voss said. Like being processed. We stayed at the FEMA station for 2 more days. We learned the false sun never moved. That it never produced heat, but food near it rotted 5 times faster. That its light muffled sound. And worst of all, that time behaved oddly near it. Mason's watch lost 5 minutes the first night. Voss's Geiger counter clicked slower when placed near the window. Reality was warping. And Nia still wouldn't speak. That changed on the 3rd night. I found her on the roof. She was standing near the broken satellite dish, staring up at the sky. She didn't flinch when I approached. I asked her if she was okay. She finally spoke. I can hear them now. I froze. Their thoughts, she said without looking at me. Not words, just impressions, intent, like echoes in my spine. They don't hate us, you know. They're just curious. Then why are they killing us? She turned to me, eyes distant. They're not killing. They're translating. I didn't sleep after that. I stayed up reading Voss's files, cross-referencing sketches and notes from survivors across the country. Every time someone looked into the light, they described similar sensations. Time dilation, auditory hallucinations, the feeling of being peeled open from the inside. One man described it best, like I'm being unzipped along every axis that makes me human. The next morning, he walked into a beam of sunlight. Voluntarily. By day 5, we'd lost contact with the rest of the world. No radio signals. No shortwave. No static. Just silence. The eye in the sky began pulsing in intervals. Every 6 hours, a ring of light spread out from it like ripples in a pond. The first time it passed through the station, the walls shuddered. Mason passed out. Lena's injured arm healed overnight, but her skin looked too smooth, too clean. Like plastic. Something was accelerating. Nia called it the threshold cycle, and it was nearing completion. That evening, Dr. Voss approached me alone. I need your help, she said. There's a device, a failsafe. We developed it in secret, an artificial umber field. A what? A machine that can generate total darkness, true light negation on a molecular level. We hope it can disrupt their perception. Where is it? She hesitated. In the city, under the old observatory. I stared at her. That's 6 miles into the open. She nodded. That's why we need you. And Nia. I didn't respond. I just looked out the window. The second sun blinked. What? Then again. And somewhere deep inside me, I knew. It had seen me. Part 5. Through the hollow light. We left before the next pulse. Dr. Voss said we'd have a 6-hour window before the next ripple from the eye passed over the earth. If we moved fast, and if we stayed in the deepest shadows, we might just make it to the old observatory alive. Mason carried the map. Nia carried the risk, and I carried the doubt. The city was worse than before. It wasn't just abandoned, it was deformed. Buildings bent inward at their tops like flowers wilting toward some invisible gravity well. Billboards buzzed with static, repeating symbols that weren't part of any known language. Some corners of the city shimmered like heat mirages, but when we got closer, we could see that time was folding there. A flock of birds flew in reverse, over and over, dying midair each time. And the light had changed. It wasn't golden, wasn't warm. It was white noise made visible, hissing down every street, radiating from cracks in the concrete, licking at the edges of buildings like mold that glowed. We stuck to the sewer entrances, collapsed scaffolding, and maintenance tunnels. Every 20 minutes, Dr. Voss checked the countdown on her analog watch. Every time it ticked, I felt something inside me fray. 2 hours in, we lost Lena. It happened near the courthouse. We were passing under the broken awning when a flicker of light appeared between the columns, thin, wavering, almost invisible. Lena stepped too close and her sling brushed the beam. She didn't scream. She split. Not into blood or guts. She just unfolded. Her body stretched flat, arms flailing for a moment as if drowning in an invisible sea, then peeled apart like paper caught in wind. The pieces curled upward, spiraling toward the second sun, then vanished. We stood frozen for 30 seconds before Nia whispered, "She's not dead. Not yet." We kept moving. After that, Mason muttered constantly. Not prayer, not panic, just numbers, coordinates, dates. He kept scratching notes into the map, rewriting over the same lines again and again. He refused to meet our eyes. Dr. Voss warned me quietly, the light doesn't just kill, it infiltrates. If he's infected, we may have to leave him behind. I didn't argue, because I was feeling it too. By the time we reached the outskirts of the observatory, it was clear we were being watched. Not from above, from beneath. The light cast shadows that twitched. We entered an old maintenance tunnel, tight, foul-smelling, full of dripping pipes, and I saw something in the darkness. It looked like a man, but wrong. Too tall. Joints bent inward. Skin smooth, pale, hairless, glowing faintly like paper held against a bulb. It stood at the end of the tunnel, facing the wall, unmoving. Then it tilted its head, slowly, impossibly, until its face looked straight at us. But it had no eyes, just a vertical line of light glowing down the center of its face like a surgical scar. It smiled. I blinked, and it was gone. We ran the rest of the way. By the time we reached the observatory's inner chamber, Mason had started bleeding from his ears. Voss was limping from a fall on the stairs. And Nia hadn't blinked once in almost an hour. The device was there. A coffin-sized machine, shaped like a long black prism, plugged into a rusting control panel covered in switches and old NASA labels. Voss moved to activate it, pulling off a tarp, flipping switches, muttering equations. That's when we heard the voice. It wasn't sound. It was inside us. "You have seen too much." Mason dropped his flashlight, fell to his knees. His eyes were gone, replaced by glowing white slits. His voice came out hollow. "They are not here to judge. They are here to correct." He lunged at Voss. I tackled him. He fought like a machine, silent, efficient, relentless. Voss screamed for me to hold him while she triggered the field. I locked my arms around his chest. Nia pulled a rusted pipe from the floor. She swung it once, then again. On the third strike, Mason collapsed, twitching. His eyes flickered and the light in them went dark. Voss activated the machine. The moment she did, the entire room dimmed, not like a light switch, but like someone had cut reality's brightness. The false sun vanished from the window. Shadows thickened. Time slowed. And then we saw it. Standing just beyond the field of darkness, right on the edge of the machine's effect, was a being. Not like the others. Not humanoid. It stood 15 feet tall, thin as wires, its skin made of fractal light patterns that changed shape every second. Its head split open in a silent howl, revealing layers of geometry and symbols that bled into each other like oil and water. I shivered, and for the briefest moment I saw through it. Not through its body, through its mind. A star dying, a planet folding inward, a species made of light reaching out, not to save, not to invade, but to catalog. We weren't enemies. We weren't prey. We were a sample. Then the being stepped back into the light and vanished. Voss collapsed. Nia fell to her knees, shaking. I looked down at my hands. They were glowing, faintly, just like Mason's. Part 6. The translation begins. The glow in my hands wouldn't fade. It was faint, pale, shifting under the skin like veins lit from within. But it was spreading. First the fingertips, then the wrists. A cold sensation like standing too close to a television screen when it's on mute. I didn't tell the others right away. Dr. Voss had collapsed after activating the field. Her breathing was shallow. She'd torn a muscle during the sprint through the tunnel and was fading fast. I wrapped her arm in gauze and gave her the last of our water. Nia sat on the observatory floor, staring at the black machine. "The Umbra device," she murmured. "It works." "Yes," I said, "but not for long." The darkness it cast was already fading. Light bled through the corners of the window again, dripping across the walls like liquid bleach. Shadows recoiled, and somewhere above us the eye blinked. Mason's body was gone. We'd left it by the stairwell, covered in a torn emergency blanket. Now the blanket lay folded neatly beside an empty bloodstain. Nia saw it too. Her face hardened. They took him. Why? She didn't answer, but deep down I knew the truth. They didn't kill Mason. They reclaimed him. Dr. Voss woke at sunset, or what passed for sunset now, a dulling of the red eye, a moment where the world paused as if catching its breath. "I have to tell you something," she whispered, "before it's too late." I leaned in. "We didn't invent the Umbra device. We found it in Antarctica, buried in a crater that shouldn't have existed, dated older than anything we could comprehend. Not built by humans, maybe not built at all." She coughed, blood on her lips. "It's not a weapon. It's a filter. It doesn't destroy them. It only hides us." "From what?" She closed her eyes. "From being rewritten." I didn't understand it fully then, but the cracks in my skin were growing. The glow inside me was no longer faint. It pulsed now like a second heartbeat. And sometimes, in the moments between thought and breath, I could hear something. A whisper. A language I shouldn't know. A structure I couldn't unlearn. Nia noticed it first. She sat beside me watching my hands. "How long have you felt it?" "Since the observatory," I admitted. She looked away. "It started," she said. "What has?" She swallowed. "The translation. There was no disease, no infection, no parasites or mind control. The light didn't consume. It rewrote our thoughts, our bodies, our time signatures. Slowly, silently, we were being transcribed into something else, fit to exist under the second sun." "You're changing," Nia said, eyes wet. "Same as Mason. Same as Lena." I held my breath. "And you knew this would happen?" She nodded. "I thought I could stop it, or slow it. But now," she looked at me, "you have maybe 2 days, maybe less." Dr. Voss died that night. Not violently, just faded. The last thing she said was, "Tell them it wasn't an invasion. It was an offer." Then she exhaled once, her chest collapsed inward like crumpled paper, and her body scattered into fine gray ash. Nia and I stared in silence. There was no blood, just the smell of burnt ozone. We buried what was left in a collapsed telescope dome. Outside, the eye pulsed again. Waves of red light rolled across the clouds like heat distortions. The sky cracked with silent flashes, revealing silhouettes behind it, shapes that moved slowly, deliberately, impossibly large. One of them looked down. I felt it, the same presence from before. It saw me, and it recognized me, like I was a file it had already opened. I spent the next hours pacing the observatory, trying to stay busy, trying not to listen to the static in my mind, because it was getting worse, louder, clearer, and with it came visions, flickers of places I'd never been, impossible geometries, glowing symbols, cities made of refracted starlight spinning above oceans of glass. And then a voice, soft, familiar, my voice, repeating the same phrase, "We are becoming." I finally told Nia the truth, that I could hear them, that I could understand them, that I wasn't sure I wanted to fight it anymore. She didn't flinch. She just walked to me and held my face in her hands. "You are still you," she whispered, "but not for long." "I don't know how to stop it," I said. "You don't?" she replied. She pulled something from her coat pocket, a small black injection gun. Cold metal, blue fluid inside. "It's a neuroseverance compound," she said, "designed to snap your mind away from the translation before it finishes." I stared at it. "What happens if it fails?" She looked away. "You don't come back." I sat with the injector in my hand for hours. The eye pulsed again. I looked at my reflection in the glass. My eyes glowed, but they weren't white like Mason's. They were prismatic, shifting between colors I didn't have names for. And in the mirror behind my shoulder, I saw something else. A figure made of latticed light. Watching. Waiting. It looked like me, but it wasn't. Not yet. Part 7. The choice to vanish. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I was no longer inside myself. I was elsewhere, drifting through impossible shapes, floating between columns of light that whispered in equations. Sometimes I glimpsed things that might have been other people, but twisted, transfigured, walking symbols, living wavelengths, and I always woke up crying, but I never remembered why. By the third pulse, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. My skin had changed. In certain lighting, you could see the glow rippling under it like a second epidermis. My pupils shimmered, refracting like glass in water. Words came to me in languages I hadn't learned. I started thinking in them. I wasn't dying. I was shifting. And I was terrified at how much it didn't scare me. Nia kept her distance. She watched me closely, notebook in hand, marking intervals, symptoms, pulse frequency. But every so often I caught her looking not at me, but through me, as if she was already mourning the part of me that was fading. "You're still here," she said once, half whispering, "but I don't know for how long." I almost asked her to inject me right then. Almost. Later that day we picked up a faint transmission. Voss's equipment, one of the few things still functional, caught a signal pulsing from the northwest. Not human, not words, but structured. 3 long tones. Pause. Then one short burst. Nia froze when she heard it. "It's a recall." To where? She looked toward the eye, now fully open above the city like a yawning eclipse. "Wherever the others went." She turned to me. "They're calling you back." That night, I took the injector and went to the telescope chamber alone. I sat in the center, knees pulled to my chest, staring at the stars that had long since been eclipsed. The second sun hovered behind the eye now, fully aligned. The world glowed red, quiet, stripped of sound. I turned the injector in my hands. What if Voss was wrong? What if it didn't sever my mind, but shattered it? What if I was already too far gone? And then I heard it again. My voice, not in my head, not an echo. A full, perfect double of me, standing across the room, its body flickering with lattice light, its eyes glowing the way mine did when I dreamed. "You don't have to fight," it said. I stood trembling. "You're not real." It tilted its head. "Neither are you. Not anymore." I tried to move, but the floor softened under my feet, like reality itself was folding. The air thickened. Gravity bent. The version of me across the room took one step forward, and the walls rippled outward as if pushed by soundless thunder. Then I heard Nia's voice. "Back away from it." She stood at the door, breathless, flashlight shaking in her hand. "It's not you," she said. "It's what you become when you let go." The double turned to her, smiled. "Wrong," it said. "I'm what he's meant to be." Then it vanished. We ran. Down the stairwell, out into the sub-basement where the Umbra device still hummed faintly. Shadows clung to it like fog. I collapsed beside the machine, breathing hard, sweat soaking through my shirt. Nia knelt in front of me, holding the injector. "We do this now," she said, "or I leave you here." Her voice didn't shake. I looked at her. Really looked. This woman who had saved my life again and again, who had known the truth and carried it anyway, who had watched friends vanish, cities crumble, light itself turn traitor, and still chose to resist. "You don't understand," I whispered. "I do," she said. "I feel everything now. Not just me. The others. I know things. I can see the patterns behind thought, the language beneath matter. I can hear the shape of silence. And you're losing yourself." I shook my head. "No. I'm finally becoming who I'm meant to be." She raised the injector. "Then I'm sorry." What happened next was instinct. I lunged, not at her, at the machine. I flipped the primary switch. The Umbra device died with a hiss. Darkness vanished. Light flooded the basement, raw and searing. The concrete glowed. Nia screamed, pulling back. But it was too late. I stood now in full light, and I didn't burn. I shimmered. She stared at me in horror. "You're gone," she whispered. "You're not you anymore." But I was, and I wasn't. I stepped toward her, one slow pace at a time. "I can still stop it," she said. "I can warn others. I can hide." She raised the injector to her own neck. I didn't stop her. Not because I wanted her gone, but because I knew some truths must remain human. She pressed the trigger. Her body convulsed. Then silence. Her pulse stopped, and the light recoiled, as if stunned. I stood there alone, surrounded by quiet radiance, and for the first time since the sky cracked open, I heard their voices clearly. Not whispers, not warnings, welcomes. Part 8. The Final Pattern. It's been 17 days since I last felt hunger. Not because I found food, because I don't need it anymore. I walk through a world emptied of noise. The cities are silent now. The cars no longer move. No birds, no insects, no wind, just the ambient hum of presence. Like the sky itself is exhaling softly. The false sun no longer pulses. It simply hangs still as death over a world that stopped breathing. And beneath it, me, walking, witnessing, listening. I'm not alone. Not in the human sense. There are no others like me left. But I feel them. Around me, beneath me, within me. Not voices anymore. Not separate. Their thoughts move through mine like tides through a shoreline, leaving symbols behind in the sand of my memory. They don't speak. They translate. I remember Nia. Her silence. Her certainty. Her refusal. She died as she chose, untouched by the new shape of things. and for that I both envy and mourn her. She remained a constant in a world rewritten by light. But me? I chose to change, not because I was weak, but because I understood. You think horror is being devoured, but that's simple. What truly horrifies you is being understood completely, taken apart, studied, copied, and then rewritten with the same syntax but a different purpose. I can still recall my name. I keep it locked away like a keepsake inside a box I no longer open. Sometimes I whisper it to myself, not to remember but to measure how far I've moved from the man who once had a heartbeat. Thomas, there it is, a shape once human. The translation is almost complete, not just for me, for the earth. The process is slow, deliberate. They don't consume worlds, they reformat them. They layer meaning atop matter, phase atop physics, rewriting gravity, rewriting biology, rewriting the very definition of life. And when they're done, the sun will blink, a second eye will close, and what remains won't be Earth. It will be something else. I was the first to make it through the threshold. I was the first to say yes, but I won't be the last, because the light never stops looking. It never stops asking, "Are you ready?" I found an old radio tower yesterday, rusting, silent, barely holding itself together. But I climbed it, not because I needed to, but because part of me still remembered the need to reach out. So here I am, speaking to whoever's left, to whoever might be hiding underground or drifting on the edge of orbit, or remembering how the world once turned beneath a human sun. I'm not here to warn you. It's far too late for that. I'm here to offer you a choice, like I was given, like we all will be. The light is coming again. I see it now, rising over the ruins, soft and gentle. It doesn't burn, welcomes, and if you let it in, you'll finally understand. So if you hear a hum on your radio, if the stars begin to flicker in patterns, if your reflection starts whispering things only you remember thinking, just know, it's not the end, it's the invitation. And when they come, don't run, don't scream, just listen and choose.
And that was tonight's tale from the Shadowed Tales archive. If it left a mark on your mind, if the silence feels heavier now, then the story did what it was meant to do. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the darkness. New stories are always on their way. Until then, keep the lights low and the doors locked.